The cowboy named Frost had never worn a coat or a jacket or even long sleeves in winter. He was born with a condition that made his body generate heat like a wood stove on full burn. Doctors said his mitochondria worked overtime and he could survive temperatures that would kill anyone else. Frost lived alone on his Montana ranch and slept outside in blizzards because indoor heat suffocated him. A climate scientist named Snow came to study permafrost melt in the mountains behind his property. She had lost her entire research team 3 years ago when a storm trapped them on an ice shelf. Snow wore 3 layers and still shivered as she set up her equipment in a frozen meadow at dusk. She saw a man lying in a snowbank wearing nothing but a thin flannel shirt and worn jeans. Snow screamed and ran to him, certain he was dead from exposure, and her heart broke for another frozen body. Frost opened his eyes and sat up and brushed snow from his hair as if waking from a pleasant nap. "Are you lost?" he asked, and Snow stared at him with her mouth open and tears freezing on her cheeks. She touched his chest and it was burning hot like a radiator, and she yanked her hand back in shock. "What are you?" she whispered, and he said, "A rancher who runs hot." "What are you running from?" Snow explained her research and her lost team and how she had not slept indoors for 3 years. Frost stood up and shook snow off his shoulders and said, "You are cold. I can feel your cold from 10 feet away." He walked to her and wrapped his arms around her without asking permission, and her shivering stopped instantly. Snow felt warmth spread through her body like honey poured into cold tea, and she did not pull away. She had not been touched in 3 years because her grief had built walls made of frost and fear. Frost held her for 10 minutes until her teeth stopped chattering and her shoulders relaxed against his chest. He said, "I have never been cold, but I have been lonely. You look lonely too. Stay tonight." Snow stayed in his cabin and he slept outside in the snow because his body would overheat indoors. She watched him through the window, lying on a pile of hay with his breath fogging in the cold air. In the morning, he brought her coffee that he had warmed by holding the mug against his bare skin. Snow laughed for the first time in 3 years because a man who could not feel cold was making her feel warm. She asked him to help her study the permafrost because his heat could melt samples without damaging them. Frost agreed, and they spent weeks drilling into frozen ground while he held the core samples in his bare hands. His touch melted the ice perfectly, and Snow collected ancient seeds and trapped gas bubbles for her research. She noticed that he was gentle with every living thing, even when they did not deserve his patience. One evening, she found him holding a frozen rabbit that had been caught in a trap and could not move. Frost cupped the rabbit against his chest, and its fur thawed, and its heart started beating again under his palms. The rabbit hopped away, and Snow said, "You saved it. Your heat brought it back from the edge of death." Frost shrugged and said, "I save frozen animals every winter. They crawl into my hay pile, and I warm them." Snow realized that his gift was not just for himself, but for every creature that could not survive the cold alone. She asked him why he did not charge money for saving livestock, and he said, "Warmth should be free like air." Snow felt her frozen heart crack because she had been hoarding her grief like a miser hoarding gold. She told him about her team dying on the ice shelf and how she had been the only survivor. Frost listened without interrupting and then said, "You survived because you are supposed to be here warming me." Snow cried and he held her, and his chest was so warm that her tears evaporated before they fell. She said, "I have been cold on the inside for 3 years. Not temperature cold, soul cold." Frost said, "Then let my body heat teach you that warmth is not just for surviving winter, but for living through it." He proposed to her on the same snowbank where she had found him sleeping and thought he was dead. Frost said, "I cannot feel cold, but I can feel you. And you feel like the only temperature that matters." Snow said yes and added, "I have studied permafrost for a decade. You melt faster than any climate change." They got married in the meadow with snow falling around them, and Frost wore a t-shirt and Snow wore a white coat. The preacher asked if anyone objected, and a frozen rabbit hopped across the altar, and everyone laughed. Frost's wedding vows were, "I promise to keep you warm, even when the world turns cold, and my body never fails you." Snow's vows were, "I promise to stop running from the cold, and start running toward your impossible heat." They danced their first dance in the snow, and Snow's feet were freezing, but Frost held her and warmed her toes. She asked him if he ever got tired of being the only warm thing in a frozen world, and he said no. He said, "Every animal I save, every person I hold, every frozen seed you melt gives me a reason to burn." Snow studied his blood and found a mutation that could help develop treatments for frostbite and hypothermia. She published a paper with his condition, but kept his name anonymous because he did not want fame or fortune. Frost continued saving frozen animals, and Snow continued her research, but now she had a lab inside his barn. They rescued a frozen foal together, and when it stood up and nursed from its mother, Snow wept with joy. She said, "I have been frozen since my team died. You did not thaw me. You taught me to thaw myself." Frost said, "No, you were always warm. You just forgot because grief is a better blanket than love sometimes." They had twins, a boy and a girl, and both inherited their father's heat resistance, but also their mother's sensitivity to cold. The children ran barefoot in snow while wearing shorts, and Snow laughed because their family was a walking miracle. Frost taught his son to save frozen birds, and his daughter to warm stray kittens found under porches in winter. Snow documented everything because she wanted the world to know that kindness could be genetic and contagious. When Frost turned 50, his body heat began to fluctuate because age slowed his overactive mitochondria. He felt cold for the first time in his life, and he shivered, and Snow wrapped him in blankets and held him. He whispered, "So this is what everyone else feels. No wonder you are all so grumpy in December." Snow laughed and said, "Welcome to being human. Now you can finally appreciate how wonderful you have been to frozen creatures." Frost developed a mild hypothermia at 55, and Snow rushed him to the hospital where doctors were baffled. They stabilized him, but his heat never fully returned, and he had to wear a jacket for the first time in his life. He looked at himself in the mirror and said, "I look like a normal person. I hate it, but I love that you are here to see it." Snow kissed him and said, "You were never normal. You were a miracle. Now you are a miracle in a puffy coat." Frost learned to appreciate cold because cold made him appreciate warmth and snow and every animal he had ever saved. He started a foundation called Warmth for Free that distributed blankets and heaters to homeless shelters across Montana. Snow ran the foundation while Frost retired from ranching and told stories to school children about his strange life. He would say, "I used to sleep in snowbanks. Now I sleep next to a woman who steals all the blankets. Life is funny." Snow developed arthritis in her hands at 70, and Frost would hold her fingers against his chest to warm her pain. His heat was weaker now, but it was enough to ease her joints, and she would fall asleep with her hands on his heart. She said, "You are still my furnace after all these years. A little rusty, but still burning." Frost replied, "I will burn until I am ash, and then I will warm you from whatever comes next after this life." Snow died at 83, and Frost held her body against his chest for 3 hours, trying to warm her back to life. He could not because his heat was gone, and she was gone, and the world felt cold for the first time without her. Frost survived her by only 6 months, and their children found him sleeping in a snowbank like the old days. He had a smile on his face and a photograph of snow on his chest, and his body was already cold when they found him. The children buried him next to snow under a tree that bloomed in winter because his heat had warmed the roots for decades. The gravestone reads, "He never felt cold until she left. Then he felt nothing else." Together, they found the perfect temperature. Every year, scientists visit the grave to study the warm soil that never freezes, even in the harshest Montana winter. Frost and snow proved that the coldest thing is not ice but loneliness, and the warmest thing is not fire but someone who stays. If you have been frozen by grief or fear or loss, find someone who will hold you until you remember how to thaw yourself. Subscribe to Stories Hub, official for more emotional Western romances about the temperatures we carry inside and the people who match them. Share this video with someone whose warmth has saved you from a cold season, whether they knew it or not.